5-MeO, why I feel it's relevant, why it excites me, that there is not one group that can say this is our medicine and this is the right way to do it. This is how you do this experience. It gives it so much more of a wide berth of experiential potential, if it is not limited to the frameworks of one specific lens.
It's the medicine for these times, plain and simple.
Hey everyone, welcome to the new location where I'm shooting. I am in Costa Rica. Finally, I've arrived. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm glad that you're all here, whether it's for the first time or you've been listening to the show. This is episode number 33. So welcome everyone. And I'm going to be sharing more as my journey unfolds in Costa Rica and the different people that I meet. I'm already meeting some amazing people, including massive spiders like tarantulas, and all kinds of massive bugs and whatnot, but that comes with the territory, and I'm trying to make friends with them all. So today's guests, I am extremely excited to introduce. Today I have Joelle and Victoria, who are the co-founders of the F.I.V.E education platform. This is a platform that is amazing because this is where I actually learned my F.I.V.E DMT trauma-informed facilitator training. So F.I.V.E stands for F.I.V.E DMT, Information and Vital Education. If you're not sure what F.I.V.E DMT is, you can go back to Chad Charles's episode. You can listen to the Spirit Pharmacist, Ben Malcolm's episode. These are going to be really helpful. But if you don't go back to those episodes, that's okay. Joelle and Victoria are going to fill you in and talk all about this molecule, talk all about their incredible retreat center, Tandava Retreats, in Tepoztlán, Mexico. They are just amazing people, very educated in the psychedelic space, just amazing entrepreneurs. I'm so excited to share these guests with you. Enjoy the episode. Hey, Victoria and Joelle, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Jesse.
Hey, Jesse.
Thanks so much for having us.
Yeah, I'm really excited for this episode. I would really love to let the audience know how I met you guys, and we can dive really deep into that today. But we met in December of 2022, right before the start of the Trauma-Informed F.I.V.E facilitator training. And it was going to be happening in a couple weeks. And I had a call with Victoria, and my gut told me to sign up at the last moment. And for those of you that have no idea what I'm talking about when I say the trauma-informed facilitator training with F.I.V.E, you will after this, listening to this episode. But I met her at the last minute. It was a recommendation from another guest who I've had on this podcast, Vanessa Kreitz. And I decided to dive into this one-year training, which we're going to be talking about, I'm sure, quite a bit. So to see you two now after meeting you guys and spending 2 weeks in Mexico and following your stories and your journeys over the last year, it's really exciting to have you on the show. So welcome. And I'm so excited to have you on today.
Thanks for having us on, Jesse.
Likewise.
Yeah. So yeah, and this is the first time I've had an episode where I have two guests on like this. So this is really exciting to navigate this. So what I'd maybe like to do is, whoever would like to start, I'd like to maybe hear, and maybe we could start with you, Victoria, maybe like a high level view of your story. I'd like to hear what really led you into this path to building this platform, this F.I.V.E platform. And, how did you get here? And then, I would just love to learn more about your story.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'll give a little high level Victoria and how I got into this space and this work. Plant medicine. Plant medicine is amazing. It's beautiful. I came to it super early on my path. I got really lucky. I think a lot of folks find plant medicine later in life. I found it when I was 19. And of course, I was working with other medicines more on a recreational fashion in my teenage years before that. But when I was 19, I traveled down to Peru in the jungle to do ayahuasca. I went for a very intensive retreat. It was 7 ceremonies in 12 days, which I had absolutely no idea what I was getting myself into. To say the least, it turned me inside out and completely changed the trajectory of my life. I was shown a completely new way of understanding and engaging with life. And really from there, I continued on learning with different medicines, with different teachers. And I knew deep in my soul that 100% I wanted to work with medicine. I wanted to support other folks through their journeys with medicines because I was seeing the profound shifts and expansions that were happening in people. But I didn't know which medicine it was going to be. And then one day, many, many years later, in the mountains of Punta Arenas in Costa Rica, I found 5-MeO, and I sat for the first time. It was the Bufo secretion. And it was a knowing. And I mean, most folks that stay with this medicine, they have that knowing to some degree come through, but it was a deeper knowing of this is what I want to dedicate my entire life and my path to. And so from that moment on, I sat with as many people as I could with 5-MeO DMT. I learned from as many people as I could. I was just a sponge soaking in everything, watching documentaries, reading books, talking to seniors in the space who had been just really trailblazing and leading the way in ethical practice. And, after doing 3 different trainings myself with this medicine, it became very clear, and also being in the space, it became very clear that there was a lot happening that was, to say the least, unethical. There were people being harmed by their experiences. There were deaths happening, traumatizations, suicides, all sorts of things. And it was all due to folks serving this medicine who didn't have the skills to be doing it. I think for your listeners, some of them who may have sat with this medicine, it can be the most beautiful, amazing experience a human can have. And it is so natural when we first come out of the experience to say, I want everyone to have this. If everybody had this experience, it would change the world. And so there can be this natural tendency of the ego or the mind to wrap itself around that experience, to try to create an identity out of it and say, I'm going to serve this medicine. I'm going to get a rattle. I'm going to get a feather. I'm going to, go take unfortunately, like 2 or 3 day training. A lot of those trainings are out there. And then we're talking about the world's most powerful medicine, right? And taking a 2 or 3 day training or even a 2-week training, there's no way to have all of the necessary skills to not only keep somebody safe, but also for benefit optimization, to make sure that they're going to get the most out of this experience. So how this platform, F.I.V.E, which we can get more into exactly what that platform is, but there's a training composed in it. And this training is for facilitators. And like you said, Jesse, yourself in a 1-year-long program, we've condensed it down to 9 months now. But the idea was to give facilitators all of those necessary skill sets because we really believe that this medicine, it can change the world without a shadow of a doubt, if it's held with integrity, if it's held responsibly. And so, that was really what F.I.V.E was birthed out of. It was an act of desperacy of seeing, people getting harmed by their experiences and wanting that not to happen. So that's why Joelle and I co-founded F.I.V.E together.
Wow. Well, thank you so much. And I would love to dive even deeper someday on another episode as the platform continues to expand and just to hear more about your story. But thank you so much for sharing that with our listeners, your story. I mean, it's really profound. I don't even think I've heard that story before after knowing you for the last 1.5 years. So thanks for sharing that. And we'll come back into a lot of the things you said, especially about the facilitator trainings that are like a day long or a weekend long. So I really love to come back to that. Joelle, would love to hear your story too for the listeners, because this is a podcast about your story, and then we talk about transformation and all the cool things you're doing in the world.
All right. Thank you, Jesse. So my story, I was deeply passionate about psychedelics since back in the 90s when I was a teenager, but I was also deeply passionate about all other substances and, fell into pretty significant addiction in my early days. With opiates, with methamphetamine, with everything under the sun, really. And I found my healing in the early 2000s through yoga and meditation. And this was after multiple incarcerations and a lot of different rehabs and a lot of different trouble. And, I got off heroin and I got off other drugs, but I was miserable still. And so, after the last time I got out of jail, I just drank my face off for a few years and got in a lot of fights and was just an unhappy person. Had a lot of just a lot of deep sadness, a lot of deep wounding in there that had never really been addressed. And like I said, ended up finding my kind of healing and evolution through the Eastern lenses. And then plant medicines were reintroduced to me in the mid to late 2000s. And this time reapproaching the psychedelic experience while having some sort of geography or framework to be able to navigate the uncomfortable parts. Because, before back in the 90s, it was all about use your mental faculties to not have a bad trip. Don't think about anything dark or else your trip will go dark. Where now we understand that those challenging experiences are deeper layers of our psyche attempting to communicate something to us. There's a message there to be experienced, but that automatic pattern of having an adverse reaction towards discomfort is so prevalent in the human condition. But having a framework or a lens of the yogic traditions to allow me to, or to help me lean into that uncomfortable aspect, this was a game changer. This was a whole different thing. And from there, I got to travel around the world for a while and got to study under some amazing teachers, amazing medicine facilitators, and began serving medicine myself back in, 2013, 2014, something around then. And 5-MeO DMT was the one that really did it for me. When I began serving medicine, I was serving DMT and NDMT, which, while chemically is structured very similar to 5-MeO, experientially this is vastly different. But when I was, we'll say, reinitiated with 5-MeO, it was that, oh, that's the one right there. That's the one. Just like Victoria said, one of the first thoughts that went through my head was, if everyone in the world could have this experience, there would be no more war. There would be no more separation. Perhaps a bit of a naive, first thought to come out of it, but I definitely see where the psyche was pointing at that time, and still do. And again, just like Victoria was saying, with 5-MeO, this is a newer medicine without an indigenous lineage of wisdom that we can look to, and thus a lot of scary things were happening. When I started serving 5-MeO in the mid 2010s, this was during the Bufo boom and the rise of notable figures who ended up unfortunately harming a lot of people. And while this is such a beautiful, potentially life-changing experience, its shadow side is equally as potent. And so I really felt the call to be a part of navigating this teething process of this particular medicine community and being a part of helping to shepherd it out into the world into a safe and effective manner. And have been lucky enough to be able to work with my beautiful partner, Victoria, in putting the 5 platform together and ensuring that there is a level or standard of care, a standard of integrity that we aim to our aim is to raise the bar for 5-MeO facilitation and make sure that it always stays about the participants' needs and not our desire to identify as a facilitator or a shaman or whatever we may want to call ourselves, but remembering that we are in service. And so it's been a perpetual, long unfolding of being able to witness beautiful healings in our participants, being able to witness our own healing and growth. There's deep medicine in all of it, and it's just been an absolute pleasure to get to be along for the ride.
Yeah, thanks, Joel. I really appreciate you sharing vulnerably about your backstory. And obviously, this podcast is called Entrepreneurs in Recovery. And, people get triggered by the word in recovery. I probably say this every other episode. But when we say recovery, we mean from intergenerational trauma. We mean from substance abuse. We mean from gambling, workaholism, procrastination, even attachment. A lot of people are learning about attachment theory and anxious and avoidant attachment. Some people get addicted to that, the way they show up in that. So really appreciate you sharing that. And I'd like to talk about my experience coming through the training. I will let you know that I had zero training as a guide or a psychedelic assisted therapist or whatever we're going to call it, which is not what the designation is, but it's a facilitation training that I would say is like a harm reduction approach that has many, many valuable principles and guidance and many mentors and guides that come into the training over the year. And many of them I'm talking to today that came through our training that I've become friends with. So I'd like to hear about, before I get too much into my own experience, what is it about this approach, this training that you have that's quite robust and quite thorough, and this harm reduction model? Like, what is it about it that differentiates it from other trainings that exist out there when it comes to using 5-MeO DMT?
Yeah. I can share a little bit and then see if Joel has anything to add on this. Yeah, so I'll share a little bit about the program, and I think that might answer some questions. So like you said, it was a year, but it's a 9 months now. So we've got a 9-month program, and over the 8.5 of those months, we have over 35 guest teachers and speakers coming in. You know, each week students are getting multiple videos, multiple handouts with a topic, really sinking their teeth into it. And oftentimes those topics are being presented by experts in the space. And, you know, really what is setting us aside from other programs, other than the length, because I think I already mentioned many of these programs are very short, is the fact that we're bringing in people from every direction. You know, we're covering pharmacology. I think you mentioned to us earlier that you're going to have Ben the Spirit Pharmacist on here. So he's in there, you know, neuroplasticity and neuroscience with Dr. Minesh Gurn. There's tons of different folks coming in. And, you know, yes, Joel and I have a lot of experience with 5-MeO DMT, but there are other aspects that need to be covered and need to be understood as facilitators, where maybe we're not the best voice to share about those things. And so that's, I think, one reason why we're so robust. And, you know, our whole aim here is to produce facilitators that are better than ourselves. And in order to do that, I think with any training, that means bringing in so many different voices, different perspective, different wisdom, and that really downloads the student with everything and all the different bits and pieces they could possibly need to be the best at what they do. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say that, you know, the idea is to produce a well-rounded training that allows facilitators to have all of the tools and support systems that they need to safely and effectively shepherd participants to and from this vastly profound experience. And that means getting to understand the full spectrum of nuances that separate 5-MeO from other psychedelics, and understand the individualized component that is so necessary with this particular molecule that allows facilitators to meet participants where they're at, rather than trying to draw them into a narrow landscape that is familiar to them. It is about having a bird's eye view on the human condition and the aspects that can be opened up during this process, and applying the appropriate skill sets, tools, techniques, and support systems to each participant's container. And so that's the idea, you know, not every participant is alike. Some participants are seeking out spiritual exploration and self-connectivity. Some are working into significant trauma. Some are working into substance abuse disorder. And there's going to be different types of practices and different types of containers that will be appropriate for each person. And so we really felt that this long format training program was really necessary to arm facilitators with the know-how and the understanding to navigate the deepest layers of the human psyche that has ever been ventured into.
Yeah, and I guess what I'm really hearing is there's not a one-size-fit approach to the way that we approach this medicine. You know, the one-size-fits-all, that it doesn't really exist in this space, and maybe in other spaces too, but especially in this space, you know, because each person, like you said, are coming for different reasons. And I'm curious, when you think about people coming for addiction, just since we might as well touch upon this, when people come to Tandava and they're wanting to work with an addiction, whether that be, you know, could be substance use disorder, could be some other type of sex addiction, or whatever it is, what's sort of the approach, the standard approach for if someone was to come out and work with you guys? What would that container look like?
Victoria, you want me to get that one first? You want to tackle that one first?
Go for it, Joel.
All right. So again, it's going to be deeply unique to each individual. But I would say overall, if there is addiction present and someone's looking to work into this addiction or history of addiction, first, during the preparatory process, it's all about getting to know them, getting to understand their life history. What was their family situation like, particularly during childhood? Were there any serious adverse or traumatic events throughout their lifetime that could be reflecting out in deep patterning like this? Getting to establish a sense of trust with those parts of the psyche that may be protecting the rest from experiencing deeply tumultuous emotion. Getting to establish a sense of trust with the whole part of them. When there's addiction, there's generally trauma somewhere. There's generally a part of the psyche that is deeply wounded, and there is a need for soothing of that area, or a need for escaping awareness in a certain area. And so rather than just trying to treat the symptom, it's about addressing the root cause. And so getting to know those deeper wounds within each participant that have resulted out in patterning of soothing or numbing or whatever it may be. And again, kind of avoiding taking a pathologizing approach of trying to get rid of those parts or trying to make those parts normal. Okay, what are those parts of the psyche feeling was lacking from their development? What do they need? It's about addressing the deeper needs of the rest of the individual. Sometimes these parts may be completely unconscious to the person. And so utilizing different modalities, whether it be somatic practices, whether it be things like internal family systems or parts work, to get to know those deeper layers. And then, of course, the most important part is going to be the integration period, particularly with addiction. We've got a beautiful, beautiful window of opportunity that is the neuroplastic stage after 5-MeO DMT, where we've got at least 4 weeks plus of space where the brain is forming new pathways. We are forming new dendrites that represent potentially new ways of thinking and new ways of experiencing our daily life. And getting to be of service to a participant when they are reshaping and restructuring their automatic patterning to shift it into something that is more intentional. Like Carl Jung said, until you learn to make the unconscious conscious, it will continue to rule your life and you will call it fate. And so working with and engaging with the unconscious content that comes up from the deepest layers of self, utilizing that beautiful window, that beautiful opening that working with 5-MeO DMT or really any psychedelic can allow us. And again, finding resolution with those fragmented aspects of the psyche that have been suffering for a long time. And it's beautiful. I don't know if you had anything to add on there, Ms. Victoria.
No. I guess the only thing that I would add, because I think the question was kind of also alluding to like, how do we approach working with those folks? Obviously there's the aspect of them not going into withdrawals while they're here. We need to consider that, making sure they're in a proper space for that. But also just kind of to piggyback off what Joelle was saying with that integration process and the ability to create new ways of being, it's really exciting, right? They really have the opportunity to do this thing differently. And I think especially when we're working with folks who have addiction and are working through recovery, really is tending to that integration very carefully, because it's very easy to fall back into those old patternings. So something that we always like to encourage participants that are working through this to do is to really think about what that integration looks like. If they have the ability to, 3 to 7 days, even more if it's even possible, to have almost like a halfway house in between, where they're not going straight back into the same old space with the same old friends and the same old triggers. We're setting ourselves not up for success when we do that. And so just, thinking about what is going to be the most nourishing environment possible as I'm creating these new ways of being for myself. And so, we spend a lot of time in the preparation process with people with addiction, really figuring out what that container would look like.
Yeah, thank you both for addressing that question. It's a big one. There's many of my listeners who are interested in learning more about addiction and to think about how this molecule can help to treat addiction. I know there's peer-reviewed studies that are starting to emerge, and there's one about alcohol, I believe, and 5-MeO DMT. There's some new ones that are on the horizon as well, because obviously we have opioid crisis still happening in a major way. And so, treating opioid addiction and really helping with this fentanyl crisis, I'm really excited to see how that emerges. But like you said, if you forego integration, I don't know if it's going to matter much. Having this massive experience and not having integration is going to be extremely, extremely dangerous. And I've seen this with people without addiction, that without the integration process, they have this, like you said, there's this neuroplasticity, and then they have this almost like a glow, and it could last for weeks. And then next thing you know, they're back to their own patterns again. And I think that I've seen that quite a bit over the last year coming through the training. And one of the things I loved about the training was my cohort. I mean, these are people I will be connected with the rest of my life, without a doubt. And, my cohort, we're still all very close. We still all talk. And for the listeners who are listening, I came through the first cohort, maybe, or was it the first cohort training?
The first full length. Yeah.
The first full length training. And, I was able to stay very connected. And I mean, we talk almost on almost a daily basis to the cohort. And I get to ask these questions. About integration, or get to ask questions about even contraindications and things like that, which we learned a lot about during the training. And that aspect of community that I have is so huge. And through the training, I was able to connect with just so many badass mofos that I'm still learning from all the time, and navigating these waters. And so I'm forever grateful for that. And our relationships continue to expand as they expand, and we all expand together as one. So that's I'd say one of the biggest benefits of the training, the F.I.V.E. training, is the community, the cohort that you come through with. I mean, I'm going to be connected with them for life. There's without a doubt. And I would say, the last 2 weeks in New Mexico of the training is where you really put your skills to the test, where you really get to apply. At the Tandava Retreat Center, you get to come in person, and you get to actually facilitate medicine journeys. You get to be guided yourself through the cohort you just came through for all of those months. And that really bonded us, I think, for life, that experience, and really understanding how to go about working with the most powerful molecule on the planet. So so I'm really excited to dive into some other things. Like one of the things I heard you guys say is 90% of people who attend Tandava's retreats have never done psychedelics. That really blows my mind. So maybe you could speak to that, like people coming to the retreat center never had done a psychedelic, and now potentially meeting the biggest experience potentially of their life. Why do you think that is? Like, what is it that draws people to Tandava that, they've never done a psychedelic and now they're there?
One of the main ideas behind, doing our initial capital raise to be able to open up a full-time retreat center focused on 5-MeO was to offer an above-board, trustworthy option for people who are not necessarily already in the psychedelic communities, or plant medicine enthusiasts who may already be inclined to, go down to Latin America or some other part of the world and engage in this type of work. As we mentioned earlier, there's a lot of people serving this medicine that do not have the skill sets needed. And so a lot of things were happening both on the underground and then on the above ground. We were seeing a big push from the drug dev, biotech, and pharma space to make anything holistic seem a bit out there and kind of even dangerous. And 5-MeO is an experience that is beyond boundaries of a specific lens. You can't say that, oh, yes, spiritual container is going to be better than a clinical container, or vice versa. This is something that's deeply individual, but we wanted something that could that people could look to and feel okay with, that they could feel safe with. You know, a lot of people going down to a center in Mexico feels a bit out there, you know, feels a bit outlandish. There's a lot of crazy media in the US and Canada about Mexico. I always forget, you know, living here for so long, you know, some people will call and be like, yeah, am I going to be safe though? You know, am I going to get kidnapped? It's like, man, you live in the USA. Like, trust me, it is far safer down here. But yeah, really just giving an option to where this medicine could be honored in safe and effective ways while perpetually keeping the participant in mind. And so we've been lucky to have been featured in some great publications, some great magazines, and you know, when people go searching for this stuff online, you know, it's they look through our stuff, they, you know, do their homework and feel that this is a place where they can trust. This is a team that seems to have done their work and seems to be promoting safe and integral ways of working with this medicine. So I think that's why we do attract that type of demographic, because we are a bit of an outlier amongst our colleagues, where most people are not jumping straight to 5-MeO for their first psychedelic. You know, they're going kind of through the path first. You know, there's probably psilocybin or LSD first, maybe ayahuasca or DMT after that, you know, et cetera, et cetera. But a lot of our demographic are people who are deeply suffering and see an article or see a news clip saying psychedelics can benefit mental health. They go down the rabbit hole. They see 5-MeO DMT as the strongest one. So they associate that with it having the most, the highest potential on helping them with their issues, with what they're experiencing. And then further going down the rabbit hole, they usually land on us and feel that they can trust us and feel that they can trust what they're offering. And it's always deeply humbling to have people put that type of trust in us and to allow themselves to step into what can be the most confrontational process of a human being's life. And getting to watch that, as always, gives us hope in humanity. You know, it's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you, Joel. And Victoria, you know, one of the things that I remember during the training, the hands-on training, is, you know, there was this balance that I felt, which was really important for me, is safety. I'm always about safety. And even in what I facilitate with workplaces and companies and trainings that I run, you know, I'm always talking about psychological safety and people feeling that they can be heard and take risks. And, you know, coming out to Mexico felt like a big risk. And, you know, but at the same time, you know, that was just because, you know, you question a lot of things when you come out there and you're like, wow, is this the path I want to take? Even though I've had similar experiences to you, Victoria, where I've met the medicine and clearly in my experiences, it was like, okay, this is my path. I feel called to it. And that was after meeting the medicine several times. So one of the things I can remember is like how safe I felt, you know, being out in Mexico, being in that environment, knowing I'm going to be meeting the medicine and serving the medicine and having a test and an exam on my skill set and all the things I've learned over the course of the many months of the training. You know, one of the things I can remember the most was safety. And I feel that your energy, Victoria, it made me feel extremely safe, especially navigating, you know, with the different devices of administration. So I'm just really curious, like, what is the benefits of having, you know, a male and female facilitators, and you guys running this business together as male and female, like that balance of that energy? What do you think what role does that play, not only in facilitating medicine, but also in running this business that you guys have?
You want to get the first part? Yeah.
Yeah, go, and then I'll piggyback.
No, I said you get the first part.
Oh, okay. Yeah, there's so much. There's so much to unpack there with two facilitators, especially a male and a female. I mean, obviously there's that safety aspect there. You never want to serve anyone with just one person. You know, folks can get very dynamic in these experiences where there's risks of blunt trauma. People have gotten concussions, asphyxiation, because, you know, some people do tend to purge. And, you know, I'm quite petite myself. If I didn't have Joel there to help me roll, maybe somebody who's a veteran with big muscles over, I might not be able to get the bucket there in time, you know? things like that. And then, you know, there's something to be said about having a masculine and a feminine energy. No matter who is coming through the center, there's typically a draw towards one sex and sometimes an aversion towards one sex. You know, sometimes, for example, if we have a female here who is working through sexual trauma, I would be the one serving her. If, for example, her clothes came off, we'd have different protocols for how we'd like to approach that. But sometimes even so, like, I think we had this in our last retreat. I was a woman who was working through sexual trauma, and we luckily had another woman here. Actually, you went through the training with her, Jessie, Sarah, and she had requested, hey, I would really love to have two women holding this space for me because I don't quite feel comfortable yet in being able to have a man present. You know, it was really beautiful as she worked through that in the first session. And then the next day she invited the men into the space. She's like, you know what? Like, I really want to face this head on. Let's bring the men in here. I know it's going to be triggering for me, but I think it's really important to have both the feminine where I feel safe and supported and that masculine so I can start working into those areas that are feeling those trauma and those pains. So yeah, there's so much benefit there. There's also some things that are like interesting too when we start to look into interpersonal dynamics like transference and countertransference. You know, like I said, sometimes folks have an aversion or draw to one sex or the other. Sometimes people might project the mother and the father onto us. And obviously it's up to us as facilitators to really hold that strong, neutral energy of being a pillar to support this experience. But it can be so necessary for them to have that experience, to, in whatever way that they're projecting the mother and the father archetype onto us, there's some type of healing happening. Whether or not Joelle and I have any idea of what's going on within their experience, there's huge benefit to it. And oftentimes, because we have private integration sessions with folks after their experiences, they get to tell us all the ways that that was beneficial for them. So yeah, there's a lot to really unpack in that question. I'd love to hear what you have to say, Joelle.
You know, just echoing a lot of what you said, having the male and female counterparts in this space really helps balance the energies. You know, it really allows people to feel safe and to feel held, particularly just as Victoria said, if someone has a draw towards one or the other, it really helps to have both sides there. And, you know, business-wise, you asked about, you know, the business as well. I think it's a very beautiful part to have both sides of the brain present when it comes to building and structuring and growing a business. You know, having that feminine intuition and that feminine touch along with the masculine aspect really helps us speak to our broader general audience. It really helps us keep our core focus in mind. I feel that particularly when working with practices that could be considered spiritual, right now in this time, there are a lot of spiritual practices that are swaying either to over feminized or over masculine. And that lack of balance really stunts the growth of anything that is attempting to be given life out in a broader sense, if that made any sense. You know, getting to work with my partner in business it's my dream. You know, it's absolutely wonderful to share this passion with your partner, and aspects of the business that would be blind spots to me, she's able to help bring to light, and vice versa. And so that complementary duality really allows us to, again, create something that is larger than the sum of its parts.
Yeah, thanks for answering that question. I was really asking myself, you know, what was it about the training and what was it about being in person that made me feel that not only could I effectively facilitate the medicine, but also to feel safe in my learning process. And so thanks for answering that question, because that's how I felt. I mean, I felt extremely safe during the Zoom experiences every single week during our training, and then coming into Mexico and, you know, having this experience was was just so profound, and to be able to feel safe during it was Yeah, I was asking myself, how is that so? And I think that you nailed it. It's balancing both. It's balancing those energies, and it was a really beautiful experience. So I appreciate that. Now, one of the things I want to ask that many people, if they haven't listened to maybe a prior episode where I went into this, there's people are hearing when we talk about 5-MeO DMT, many people are right away, it's Bufo, right? It's okay, it's the toad, it's Bufo. Just so we can help our audience to understand the differences and also maybe why one would work with one over the other. Could you maybe, whoever would like to take the question about the difference between Bufo Alvarius, the Bufo Alvarius toad molecule, and then also the pure molecule? What would be the differences and the advantages of one over the other?
Yeah.
I'm happy to share. Yeah, so 5-MeO DMT. What is 5-MeO DMT? There's kind of multiple areas that it can come from. Obviously in nature, when we're talking about the toad, but there's also seeds. You might have heard of Viopo. It has 5-MeO DMT, Phalaris grass. There's many different places that it resides. Also, something interesting is 5-MeO DMT has been found in different samples of urine and blood and cerebrospinal fluid. So it's in the human body. And then it can be produced in a laboratory as well, which would be, when you hear somebody saying they're working with pure 5-MeO DMT or Jaguar or synthetic. It has kind of a few different names. But how do we choose which one we want to work with? And are the experiences the same is always the question, right? So the difference between the two, obviously with the Bufo secretion, it's coming from a toad. It's coming out of the parotoid gland. So it's milked and expressed onto some glass. It's dried there. And the contents inside of the secretion is obviously there's 5-MeO DMT, anywhere from 10 to 30% 5-MeO DMT. And then there's a cocktail of different tryptamines and alkaloids in there. One of the alkaloids, or maybe even more, at least one, is cardiotoxic to humans, which means that if we are to serve this medicine to somebody who may have an underlying heart condition, maybe there's someone who's like 85 and they don't know, maybe the integrity of their heart is kind of wearing down. This is kind of a bit of a red flag or a caution where we might worry about it. So that's one thing, the cardioactive elements in that. And then also dosage specificity. I just said there's 10 to 30% 5-MeO DMT in the toad secretion, and every sample is just so different. And that means that even if we have the most accurate scale on the planet, we as facilitators actually have no idea how much we're giving somebody. And that's really important in facilitation. We never want to give somebody too much, kind of like what would be called a whiteout experience. Sometimes when we give too much, people have uncontrollable reactivations, those types of things. And also therapeutic advantage, like with Bufo secretion, because you don't know how much you're giving somebody, there's a lot of opportunity that's kind of being missed out on. Because if I flip over to the synthetic or the pure molecule, we can get super accurate with how much we're giving somebody. And oftentimes, if we're working in those low to medium thresholds with the pure molecule, this is where we see a lot of therapeutic advantage. Sometimes the way that we often work with folks is the first time that they're sitting, if they're in the right space, they're in a stable space, the intention is they want to have a big experience, we'll go in for the full dose with them. And then everything is starting to come up as they're here in retreat. And the next time that we go in with them, they'll really know, hey, I've got some grief coming up, or I've got some trauma coming up, and I really want to focus on that. And so then we can work with those low to medium doses with people and really actually get in there, because they're still tapped into that mystical space. It's still a huge experience, but they're better able to navigate into the areas that they want to be healing into. And so in terms of the experience, is the experience the same? Is it different? Why would I want to do one over the other? Obviously, there's that safety element to it and the therapeutic element, but the experiential aspect, we feel, and everyone has their own different opinions, we feel it's the same experience. The only thing that I can say is different is sometimes I feel a little bit more of a body load with the toad, maybe like a little bit of a more extended come out on the other side, but typically it's the exact same experience. We're seeing the same type of healing experiences and processes with people.
The only thing I would add to that is, the unfortunate thing is that it's formed a bit of a polarizing argument, the synthetic versus natural, sides, which for me feels very short-sighted. Of course, those of us who came from the underground, particularly those of us who came from more holistic or naturalistic or spiritual backgrounds, there's going to be an automatic tendency to go for the quote-unquote natural. There's going to be an automatic tendency to take that over something that was lab-made. But I feel that this 5-MeO-DMT in general invites us to really, I would say, look at the paradoxes here, to begin to look at the identities of separation that we've created and examine what aspects are practical and what aspects are simply tied to an identity. And just like Victoria said, experientially, this is exactly the same. It is just the same experience, but you have people on one side saying, oh, well, Bufo is from nature, that's real medicine, it's a sacrament. If it's lab made, then it's poison. And then on the other side, you have people, saying anyone using Bufo is reckless and dangerous because they're harming the toads. There's definitely issues. But I think this is an invitation for us to examine where our propensity towards identification with our specific paths or our specific fields may come into play and overtake reason. Because if we are saying it is because we are naturalistic and because we want to embrace nature, then pushing forward on something that is having a negative impact on nature, there's a bit of a contradiction there. And so what I would love to see is for it to stop being a both sides pointing at each other and saying one side is right, and more of a conversation on how and why and what can we do to mitigate harms on both sides.
Okay, so I'm really curious. With this molecule, it's really interesting because there is no lineage to this molecule, as you mentioned before. And I'm just so curious, why do you think that is? Why is one of the most powerful mystical experiences on the planet, number one, why do you think there's no lineage? Or is there some type of something we don't know that maybe there is? And, what is it about the emergence of this molecule in the last, let's say decade or so? Why is this emerging the way it is? So anyone who'd like to take that question, I'm just really curious.
Yeah. I feel that this medicine is very in sync with the current evolution of human consciousness. As we said, there is no ancient indigenous lineage that we can look to for wisdom here. While 5-MeO-DMT is present in the yopo seed that was used for millennia, also present in certain Amazonian plants, though pure 5-MeO use is very different. So if anyone's done yopo before, the experience is vastly different. It has 5-MeO in it, but it also has a cocktail of other tryptamines and alkaloids in there. So experientially are very, very, very different from each other. 5-MeO, why I feel it's relevant, why it excites me that there is not one group that can say this is our medicine and this is the right way to do it. This is how you do this experience. It gives it so much more of a wide berth of experiential potential. If it is not limited to the frameworks of one specific lens. This experience can be guided to and from through so many different lenses, whether it be the Eastern lenses, whether it be the shamanic traditions, whether it be Western psychotherapy, whether it be Jungian work. It allows us to make it about the participant and not a specific man-made spiritual philosophy. It allows us to cut right through the ideologies and go straight to source. And that's something that's very exciting to me. That's something that's very, very beautiful. This molecule invites us the opportunity to look at our own deepest core beliefs in philosophy, spirituality, religion, whatever it may be, and view them as simply lenses that we are using to attempt to grasp something that is ineffable by nature. The great mystery itself cannot be described. You know, the Taoist said, any Tao that can be spoken is not the true eternal Tao. The Greek philosopher Heraclitus said, if you name me, you negate me. There's something about that specialness of an experience that is not bound by one lens or bound by one body of idealism. And so that's really beautiful. You know, again, I think this medicine is inviting us to work together. It's inviting us to let go of the aspects that separate our different belief systems and get to understand that there is the same core life force that is animating every single one of us. And we can work together in honoring that rather than difference in approaches of worship or difference in approaches of ceremony style. All of these things are man-made by nature. They are products of the ego. No matter how intricate and how beautifully profound any spiritual belief system is, it is still by nature a product of the ego. For millennia, humanity has been playing a giant game of telephone. And every time that answer goes through, it's going through the egoic filters. So again, that's why I feel this is so special. This is an experience that is beyond any belief system and yet is the experience that all belief systems are pointing towards.
Yeah, well, thank you. Victoria, do you have anything to add to that, or is that we
There's
feel?
just one simple line that's coming, and it's the medicine for these times. Plain and simple.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for sure. I say for sure just because of my own experiences with meeting the medicine at a very low dose at times and then at higher doses at times, and just having those experiences that make it that I can't even put my finger on it to describe what had taken place, and nor do I want to. And I've tried. I've tried to explain it, and I feel like I'm better off not explaining it and just utilizing my energy and the way that I show up for people to ask themselves if they want to meet the molecule and when they're called. So those are great answers. I really appreciate that. So a curiosity I have for you both is, what is it? So, I'm curious, do you guys meet the molecule once a month, once a year? Like, what is the frequency that you guys utilize this medicine? Because I'm curious about your tune-ups or your sources of energy that you're utilizing. How often do you guys utilize this, and what other sources of energy do you draw upon besides this medicine?
Yeah, I'd love to share a little bit about it. And, it's so different and unique as our own processes shift and evolve. There's been times where I know both of us have sat with the molecule multiple times in a month. There's been times where we've waited a year in between. And, I think that it's important that we never have a cookie cutter approach. Like, I need to do it every month or every quarter. It's like integration is so key. We choose never to do any type of deep healing work with medicines unless we know that we have the time to integrate it afterwards. Because, as you learned in the training program, Jesse, there is a potential for ego inflation. And we want to get the absolute most out of this experience. If we are sitting with this molecule and we are taking the time afterwards truly to integrate the different lessons that are moving and processing through us, to really be with them and treat it with the reverence it deserves, we have the opportunity to really transform our lives in big and beautiful ways, to teach us how to better live in unity and harmony with our communities, with the world. But on the flip side, if we are doing the medicine over and over and over, we're just doing it because we think we want to, feel that enlightened or that connection that the medicine can bring to us. There's like kind of this like greedy energy to it. We're not really approaching it with that reverence anymore. It's kind of like a more type situation. And on the flip side, that ego inflation can happen. That's why in the 5-MeO space, there's narcissism is kind of running deep, messiah complexes, the whole 9 yards. And the reason for that is non-integration. So to answer the question, it's completely unique and flexible to what is going on in our own in our own processes and situations in our lives. So I think right now, Joelle and I recently had a medicine session, I think maybe about 3 weeks ago. And it had been about maybe 7 or 8 months that we hadn't done medicine before that. And I think Joelle even longer.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm just always curious. And, when we think about other sources of energy, you guys are out in Tepoztlán, Mexico, and, you have this beautiful sun and you're out in nature barefoot all the time. I know that because I was there for 2 weeks and everyone's barefoot. So what other sources of energy would you recommend for people or that you utilize with the integration process that could be really helpful after an experience with F.I.V.E?
Working with a specialist. I'd say that is the one thing, I've got a great therapist here in Tepoztlán that I work with, particularly before and after my good medicine sessions. That's key. Nature is a huge component. Being in nature and allowing ourselves to soak up the environment. I mean, we evolved for eons and eons to be part of a living system within this earth sphere. And, our bodies and our psyches know how to heal. We've just got to get the mind out of the way. And if we can plug ourselves into a beautiful naturalistic setting and allow ourselves to be held by the elements around us, that goes a long way.
Victoria, I'd love to hear anything you'd like to share on that.
I just think I really just want to piggyback off Joelle here because therapy is so key. I don't think that there should be anyone really working with medicine, whether it's an integration specialist or a therapist, not pairing the two. They're like peanut butter and jelly and they go together. Because, especially with 5-MeO, it's so different. When we're working with other medicines, ayahuasca, psilocybin, San Pedro, we're going on a multi-hour experience. And in that, there's so much content and imagery and downloads that can come. Where difference with 5-MeO, oftentimes it's so beyond the mind. There's not a lot of content in the actual experience on the mat to bring back. Sometimes we'll get little bits and flashes, but oftentimes folks come out and they're like, wow, I don't know what to do with that. I can't even conceptualize it or remember what happened, but I feel it. I know it, and it's inside and it's still processing and moving. So the idea here is with 5-MeO, we have to have integration and we have to give ourselves the space to know what practices are the right practices and exercises for us to do at that specific moment in our life. Because every time that we go in with medicine, and we engage with the integration process, the tools that we need and the practices are going to be unique to what is the new thing that's processing. It's like this never-ending rabbit hole where once we work through one layer, it unveils another layer, and that layer needs different attention given to it. So I think the key is emphasizing, yes, the integration, but the space given to ourselves, because we're never really going to know what tools need to be applied to our process if we're not being with that process and we're listening to the cues that are coming up from our body somatically. Where's the energy stuck? What's that associated with? What kind of dreams are we having? There's so much there. And so, yeah, the idea again, which I shared about it, I think earlier, was in that integration process, 3 to 7 days, if more, obviously, if that's available to us, but to give ourselves that space to see what this molecule is bringing to surface and then meeting it with what it needs, depending on what's coming up.
Yeah, I can't agree more. I mean, this whole journey of coming into this space of these psychedelic medicines, I've had an integration specialist since day one. And in many ways, that's been the difference maker. In fact, it has been the difference maker. And so anyone listening, having a therapist that's familiar with psychedelic medicines or having an integration specialist that you work through the F.I.V.E platform and Tandava, this is critical. And this is anyone who's listened to the show knows that I'm all about integration and working with someone and having a community that you can share with. And so I couldn't agree more. So question I have for you both is, what are you guys, what's the highest vision and intentions right now that you're manifesting in your world right now? What's happening in your world right now that you're looking to manifest and bring forward?
I can go first, and then I'll let Joelle kind of take it on the meta in terms of the business side of things. But something that I'm really focused and dedicated on right now is working with women survivors of sexual trauma. I have a background in sexual trauma myself, and living and working here at Tandava Retreats, where we are in Mexico, we've had folks from all walks of life coming through, and I can say that there is a difference. I would say there's a difference I've noticed with women survivors coming through with this medicine versus with other conditions. Like this condition, working with this molecule, because it's so somatically based, right? And women, we're very connected to ourselves. When we give ourselves the space, we're very intuitive beings. And when the body is holding on to trauma somatically, and this medicine as a catharsis to bring that trauma up to surface and be worked with, well, pairing women up with this medicine and with sexual trauma has been just so powerful. We've seen really, really, really big transformations happening, and it's really exciting for me. So yeah, I've teamed up with Dr. Holly Richmond, who's a specialist in sexual trauma. She's a somatic psychotherapist, and we're going on our second retreat for women survivors in June. So actually next month. And yeah, my vision is seeing this beautiful space for healing, reaching the women that need it, and having a safe space finally for women to come and do this kind of work. So yeah, I'm putting a lot of energy right now into that space.
I love that, and such needed work. I really appreciate you sharing that with us. And Joelle, what about yourself?
A lot of my focus has really been on the entrepreneurial side, the business aspect of this. All of us coming from the underground, something that is, definitely a factor is most skilled people who have devoted men to be able to bring something like this to scale. And I feel that is something that is greatly needed. And so a big role that I found myself in is creating a platform that can grow and become a home for talented individuals to bring their skill sets to life and to bring their skill sets to a broader audience, and getting to learn how to navigate the wild geography of finding the balance and making sure that
well we're going to cross our fingers with all that, but thank you for that was literally going to be my last question before the one about how can people find you guys and work with you. So we'll just cross our fingers, and if worse comes to worse, we'll have to just re-record again. But I think that we'll just leave it at that question, and I love that. So let me ask you guys, where can people work with the F.I.V.E. education platform and learn about the facilitator training or come to Tandava? How do people find you? Where can they find you guys?
Absolutely. Yeah. So if anybody's interested in learning more about 5-MeO-DMT, you can head to F.I.V.E, spelled FIVE-MEO.education. You'll find everything you could possibly ever want to know about 5-MeO-DMT there. We've got integration specialists. We've got free bi-weekly integration circles. We've got monthly webinars with different experts in the field. And then we have the information about the facilitator training on there as well. And then also, if you're interested in working with 5-MeO-DMT, obviously you can come here to Tandava Retreats. The website's tandavaretreats.com. And we've got all sorts of different types of retreats, everything from, like I said, women survivors of sexual trauma to meditation, 5-MeO-DMT entrainment retreats. We have retreats that are called inhale retreats, which are kind of deep dives into the self. We've got explorative ones as groups that are called exhale. And so, yeah, feel free to reach out to us for a free discovery call if you want to hop on the phone with us and learn more.
Well, that's fantastic. And I couldn't recommend it more. Anyone can reach out to me personally if they want to hear about my experiences coming through the cohort in 2023 and completing that process and graduating. It was a life-changing endeavor, to say the least. And I'm so grateful to have the both of you on today. And you guys are amazing. And I'm definitely going to have you on in the future so we can hear how this platform is expanding. So thank you guys so much. So great to have you both on the show today.
Thank you, Jesse. It was great to be here. Yeah, so glad to have you on the F.I.V.E. family and see the beautiful work you're doing.
Appreciate you both so much. Thanks for watching today's episode. Your support means the world to me. So thank you for liking and subscribing to the YouTube channel and to this podcast. We've got amazing content and amazing interviews coming out soon. So thanks again. Enjoy your day. Sending love and blessings to you all.